I hope you're still enjoying our story of James and the giant peach. Now, when we left James last time, he just found a mysterious hole in the side of the peach. So let's find out what is going to happen next. Chapter 10. It was quite a large hole, the sort of thing an animal about the size of a fox might have made. James knelt down in front of it and poked his head and shoulders inside. He crawled in. He kept on crawling. This isn't a hole, he thought excitedly. It's a tunnel. The tunnel was damp and murky, and all around him there was a curious, bittersweet smell of fresh peach. The floor was soggy under his knees, and the walls were wet and sticky, and peach juice was dripping from the ceiling. James opened his mouth and caught some of it on his tongue. It tasted delicious. He was crawling uphill now, as though the tunnel were leading straight towards the very centre of the gigantic fruit. Every few seconds he paused and took a bite out of the wall. The peach flesh was sweet and juicy and marvellously refreshing. He crawled on for several more yards, and then suddenly, bang! The top of his head bumped into something extremely hard, blocking its way. He glanced up. In front of him there was a solid wall that seemed at first as though it were made of wood. He touched it with his fingers. It certainly felt like wood, except it was very jagged and full of deep grooves. "Good heavens," he said. "I know what this is. I've come to the stone in the middle of the peach." Then he noticed that there was a small door cut into the face of the peach stone. He gave it a push. It swung open. He crawled through it, and before he had time to glance up and see where he was, he heard a voice saying, "Look who's here!" And another one said, "We've been waiting for you." James stopped and stared at the speakers, his face white with horror. He started to stand up, but his knees were shaking so much that he had to sit down on the floor again. He glanced behind him, thinking he could bolt back into the tunnel, the way he had come, but the doorway had disappeared. There was now only a solid brown wall behind him. Chapter 11. James's large, frightened eyes travelled slowly round the room. The creatures, some sitting on chairs, others reclining on the sofa, were all watching him intently. Creatures? Or were they insects? An insect is usually something rather small, is it not? A grasshopper, for example, is an insect. So what would you call it if you saw a grasshopper as large as a dog? As large as a large dog? You could hardly call that insect a grasshopper, could you? There was an old green grasshopper, as large as a large dog, sitting directly across the room from James now. And next to the old green grasshopper, there was an enormous spider. And next to the spider, there was a giant ladybird with 9 black spots on her scarlet shell. Each of these 3 was squatting upon a magnificent chair. And we've got a little picture of those 3 insects on their magnificent chairs. So they're pretty big, aren't they? On a sofa nearby, reclining comfortably in curled up positions, were a centipede and an earthworm. On the floor, over in the far corner, there was something thick and white that looked though it might be a silkworm. But it was sleeping soundly, and nobody was paying any attention to it. Every one of these creatures was at least as big as James himself, and in the strange greenish light that shone down from somewhere in the ceiling, they were absolutely terrifying to behold. "I'm hungry," the spider announced suddenly, staring hard at James. "I'm famished," the old green grasshopper said. "So am I," the ladybird cried. The centipede sat up a little straighter on the sofa. "Everyone's famished," he said. "We need food." 4 pairs of round black glassy eyes were all fixed upon James. The centipede made a wriggling movement with his body, as though he were about to glide off the sofa, but then he didn't. There was a long pause and a long silence. The spider, who happened to be a female spider, opened her mouth and ran a long black tongue delicately over her lips. "Aren't you hungry?" she asked suddenly, leaning forward and addressing herself to James. Poor James was backed up against the far wall, shivering with fright, too terrified to answer. "What's the matter with you?" the old green grasshopper said. "You look positively ill." looks like he's going to faint any second, the centipede said. Oh my goodness, the poor thing, the ladybird cried. I do believe he thinks it's him that we are wanting to eat. There was a roar of laughter from all sides. Oh dear, they said. What an awful thought. You mustn't be frightened, the ladybird said kindly. We wouldn't dream of hurting you. You are one of us now. Didn't you know that? You're one of the crew. We're all in the same boat. We've been waiting for you all day, the old green grasshopper said. We thought you were never going to turn up. I'm so glad that you made it. So cheer up, boy, cheer up, the centipede said. And meanwhile, I wish you'd come over here and give me a hand with these boots. It takes me hours to get them all off by myself. So James has just gone into the peach and met these fantastic creatures. And we've got a picture there of the centipede and the earthworm. And he's just mentioned his boots, hasn't he? He's got boots on all of his feet. So we'll have to wait till tomorrow to find out what happens next.